Are you one of the millions of organizations affected by the Conficker worm? It may be your own fault. Researchers have discovered a new version, Conficker C. Previous versions affected up to 10.5 million people. Network World Canada decided to have a fireside chat with James Quin, an analyst at Infotech Research Group.
Quin explains why Conficker is a threat.
In and of itself, Conficker doesn't necessarily cause any core fundamental security threats by itself, but because it opens you up to the possibility of the download of other malware, it acts as a venue for other threats to enter the network. The second problem that Conficker presents is that it blocks access to a lot of security sites. It limits the ability of the device to access sites that will deal with anti-malware, and so it acts to limit the effectiveness of the device in terms of protecting itself. So it can certainly have.
He said the Conficker worm goes to show it pays to keep your firewalls up to date.
The Conficker continues to spread is just indicative that machines are not being kept up to date.
Quin pointed out that the vulnerability was first discovered last fall, and a patch update has been available ever since.
What the Conficker does is it reaches out to inappropriate domains, to certain sites to bring malware back. So having your firewall configured properly so that those kind of outbound transactions aren't allowed is a security step that you can take.
Recently, a Romanian company, Bitdefender, announced downloadable software that it says will get rid of Conficker.
When you get to the point where you have plug-and-play removal of a threat, you're starting to get towards the death knell of that threat. It really is no longer a problem. Typically what we see with the spread of viruses, worms, and other types of malware is that initially we're able to detect, and we may be able to put some initial protection mechanisms in place, but the removal of the threat from an infected machine can be quite a complex and time-inducing task.
But one way to prevent this in the first place is to have strong passwords.
One of the primary things that Conficker does is it will attempt to access the admin share capability of any server using a string of known passwords. If you're not using one of those weak passwords, it really is limited in its ability to spread. So
some basic security precautions will go a long way to keeping Conficker away from your network.
Use strong passwords, make sure your systems are patched, keep your AV definitions up to date, and use healthy firewall rules, and Conficker really shouldn't ever have been a problem.
So Conficker, also known as Down It Up, has acted as a worm. It has launched brute force attacks on administrative passwords. It has slowed down networks. It's affected millions of machines. But it depends on a known vulnerability in Windows that Microsoft announced months ago. As James Quin said, if you did your patches and you actually used strong administrator passwords, you probably weren't infected. And if you were, well, there's always Bitdefender software. For Network World Canada, I'm Greg Mechbach.